Welcome back. A report by the Central Bank of Nigeria shows that consumers' overall confidence outlook worsened in the first quarter of 2018 as fewer consumers were optimistic in their outlook. Their index stood at minus 6.4 points in the first quarter from 16.6 points in Q4 2017, while some respondents in the CBN's Consumer Expectation Survey attribute this moderation to worsening economic condition and family financial situation. Let's get more on this from one of the research analysts at the financial derivatives company, Pamela Basidiuk. Well, thanks for coming to the program.
Thank you for having me, BC.
What does this decline in Nigeria's consumer confidence index actually mean?
Okay, so first of all, consumer confidence measures consumers' assessment of present economic situations and how hopeful they are about the future. So what this means is it means that it measures how consumers feel about the current economic situations have affected them and how optimistic, pessimistic, or neutral they are about the future. So this decline in consumer confidence shows that consumers were worse off during this this Q1 2018. And why is this? So you're taking into consideration family income, which is then their source of primary income, and then other funds from probably pensions and grants, and then taking into consideration family financial situation, which shows that the level of savings, their investments, how much cash they have or debt had declined, and then even taking into consideration economic conditions, despite the fact that we've seen an improvement in our economy, we've seen an improvement in inflation, we've seen an improvement in PMI figures, even our currency has been stable, relatively stable in Q1 2018. So all this shows that consumers are not optimistic about the future. So what this means is that consumers might decide to save less, save more and spend less, basically.
Now, you just talked about the PMI index, which has increased. I mean, this CCI index is declining at a time when the PMI index is on the increase. Why do we have that contradiction?
Okay, so it's important for us to understand the different indices. Like I said earlier, consumer confidence measures consumers' assessment of economic situations and how optimistic they are about the future, while on the other hand, the PMI measures the economic or the strength or the economic health of the manufacturing sector. So that's taking its inventory into consideration. So now, also, we look at on the other hand, you also want to consider that consumer confidence is measured on a quarterly basis, while the PMI is measured on a monthly basis. Now, let's go back and see what's happened in Q1 2018. So we've seen that in Q1 generally characterized by a slowdown in economic activities. We witnessed that in the PMI figures for January. We saw that there was a sharp decline in PMI from as high as 64 points in December. It came down to 54.6 points. This was due to the post-Christmas blues, but it has picked up consecutive months. We're now at 59 points PMI, and then if you look at in terms of the consumer space, we've however seen that unemployment and unemployment has been on the rise, even though it's a lagging indicator. It's at 40%, at the spike of 40%, but still it's affecting consumers, and that's why we're seeing a decline. So first off, we need to understand the difference, and then understand that this consumer confidence is on quarterly basis, PMI is on a monthly basis, and that's basically it.
So if the consumer confidence index declines again in the second quarter of 2018, could it mean that Nigeria faces a looming economic crisis?
Not necessarily. We have to take into consideration Q1 2018 GDP numbers, which have not been released yet. So we are still waiting for that before we can make firm decisions. And then if we look, just recently, IMF has reiterated its stand that Nigeria's economic growth would expand by 2.1% in 2018. What this means that we expect to see 4 consecutive growths in this year. So we expect to see a positive growth in Q2 2018. And also, if we take into consideration the budget is about to be passed, which would be approved in Q2 2018, we should see an increase or a spur in economic activities, because there will be a release of funds, and then people can there'll be more infrastructural development in place. And then also, if you look at CCI, even though it declined in Q1 2018, there's an expectation of a positive outlook for Q2, as consumers are optimistic about forex stability. They're optimistic about a decline in inflation. They're also optimistic about the anticipated improvement in economic conditions as well. So, however, there are still downsides to this. We still need to take into consideration possible oil production shocks or a shock in the global market, we also need to take into consideration that the passage of the budget or the approval of the budget, even though, yes, it's going to increase funds, it will still put some form of inflationary pressures. And then also it will put some pressures on the Naira as well, because there'll be more demand for dollars, foreign exchange.
Well, thanks, Pamela. Pamela Basaduke is a research analyst at the Financial Derivatives Company. Well, in other stories now, the International Monetary Fund has asked central banks to take a gradual and transparent approach to tightening monetary policy, warning that unexpected moves could shock the global economy. In its Global Financial Stability Report released in Washington, D.C., the fund cautions that vulnerability may make the road ahead bumpy and could put growth at risk. Channel's business correspondent Chimezie Obiwago sent in this report from Washington.
Proceedings on the third day of the meeting started with the release of the Global Financial Stability Report. The IMF's growth at risk analysis, which links financial conditions to the distribution of future global growth, indicates that under a severe adverse scenario, growth could be negative 3 years from now.
The economic recovery has remained resilient despite market volatility. But investors and policymakers should not take too much comfort from today's relatively easy financial conditions. They should remain attuned to the risks associated with rising interest rates, elevated market volatility, and an escalation of trade tensions. The road ahead may well turn out to be bumpy.
The report discusses 3 main vulnerabilities, which include stretched valuations across many asset classes, borrowing by emerging markets and low-income countries, and bank dollar liquidity mismatches. But which countries are more exposed to these vulnerabilities?
Different countries are going to be exposed to such a negative scenario in different ways, and that really depends on the buildup of vulnerabilities in countries. So countries that are building up higher debt levels, that are exposed more to currency mismatches and liquidity transformation, are going to be exposed more to any adverse developments in terms of global financial conditions.
Regional and country specifics will be discussed extensively on Friday, April 20. From Washington, D.C., Chimezie Obiwago, reporting for Channels Television News.
And that's where we end today's program. Thank you for watching. I am Bisi Adebayo.